Hi, Simon. So, we're here today to talk about the Churchill Fellowship. Back in 1991, you were awarded a Churchill Fellowship. So, could you tell us a little bit what that entailed?
Well, it entailed travel to three specific destinations which had operations that I was interested in. And the whole purpose was initially to find out how do you operate in very short seasons in nature tourism and still survive. So the first destination was Canada, British Columbia, where I met up with the head of the British Columbia Adventure Tourism Department, a fellow called Frank Hussey, who subsequently 2 weeks later moved to Tasmania. And he gave me access to a range of experiences that fitted what I was looking for, which was invaluable. He introduced me to various to enable me to find out more. Also, I went from Vancouver to Vancouver Island because I was then developing Strawn Village. I had a particular interest in old villages on the water, and there were two incredible places there that were basically abandoned. These were waterfront villages, one of which had a small population permanently, and the other one just had a kind of caretaker population. But they were very significant in that they were adjacent to whale migration routes, etc. And also there's a lot of wildlife around, sea eagles and that sort of thing. So one of the ideas that came out of that was sitting in a pub in one of these places on the water, and I saw an eagle in a tree about 300 metres away, and it dropped out of the tree and headed straight towards me, and then it dropped into the water and picked up a salmon in front of me and went back to its tree. I thought, that's smart. And I talked to the locals, and they said that happens all the time, that business. So that put a germ of an idea for me, and to the cruise that I started here later on the Derwent. Subsequently, I developed a cruise out of Hobart down to Peppermint Bay, and part of the experience was to watch the sea eagles along the shore. We threw fish that we had out of the estuary, we threw them in the water. The sea eagles came down next to the boat, picked them up and went.
Wow.
So it wasn't part of another experience, but that's where that idea came from. And in addition to that, I got an idea about underwater cameras because we have marine reserves down the channel, particularly at Tinderbox. And I started playing around with underwater cameras and incorporating visions of the crayfish areas here in the Derwent, and I could show that as well as part of the cruise. So that evolved from there.
And what was happening in Alaska that you were?
I went to Alaska, and I had a friend who had several camps that he had built, lived in Anchorage, and he, like most Alaskans, he owned a float plane and he flew out to his camps regularly, although in the winter it's not possible because of the weather, but in the summer, which is pretty short. And these camps were literally wilderness operations that he built himself. And I got an understanding of the local wildlife situation. And that whole trip was not about fishing or about the opportunities for fishing, because we don't have that here. Because a lot of the Alaskan and the British Columbia tourism is around trout fishing and salmon fishing and also some heavy duty sea fishing. So I didn't touch on that much, but I had an introduction. And I managed to get a slot to enable me to spend 10 days in Glacier National Park camping with the bears, and it gave me a great appreciation of their wilderness there. And it's a very strict, they allow only, 20 people out in there at a time. It's a vast area, but they're very restrictive in whether you can go in. But that gave me another insight into what people will pay to do something that no one else can, or very few. Then I have an introduction to the Denali National Park manager. Denali National Park achieves 600,000 visitors in a season which lasts 15 weeks. And so that's a big number of people to go in and out. And there was one lodge which was 1,400 kilometres in from the park entrance. And that lodge, the only way you could get in was having permission and being one of a few that had pre-booked. And it's booked out. It's called Denali Lodge, and it was booked out for years ahead. And I managed to fluke 3 days in there, which was absolutely gave me an understanding about what you have to provide. So it was about an exclusive experience, very simple. There were bunk beds, shared bathrooms which had to walk out to and back in, and twin share in bunks. And then the food was very simple, kind of camp food, if you like, but the whole thing was, it was very expensive because it was so exclusive. And it was about the experience out there, because when you went there, you got unbelievable wildflowers at that time when it's open, but incredible wildlife as well. That gave me an absolute insight into how you could make a lot of money with a very simple offering.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who are interested in that are there because they want to experience that other stuff. And if you gave them a nice steak, that was good, but you didn't have to.
Yeah.
But it had to be edible.
Okay.
Simple lessons there.
So then you went off, your final destination was Scandinavia?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I was thinking about Alaska. Oh, yeah. Yeah, one of the big learnings in Alaska. Alaska has Mount McKinley, which is actually the highest climb in the world from its base to its top. But it starts at a fairly low altitude and goes up 24,000 feet, a low altitude in relation to sea level. So Mount Everest is higher, but it starts higher, if you follow that.
Yep.
So the interesting thing there was that the week before we went there and stayed in the village at the base of Mount McKinley, where they basically run ski planes out of the main street of this village, and they land on Mount McKinley near the base camp, and then they go from there. But the week before we were there, 13 people died on the mountain in storms. Very common. Yeah, and there was a lot of hooey in the main city newspapers and on the news and all this about, people going out and getting killed and all that. So I had arranged to spend 2 days with the manager of the park, and my first question to him was, how do you handle this terrible publicity around people being killed on the mountain? And he said, Simon, these people have made their own decision to go there, and I'm not going to spoil their fun. And if they want to go there and they get killed, it's their problem to get themselves out. In other words, you have to pay up front to have your body taken back out if you die. And he said, so it just water off a duck's back. I'm not here to feed the people out there. It's about the people that do come and want to climb it. That's a really key learning. And I thought that was so sensible. And nanny state Australia and various other nanny state, you're not allowed to do that, Too dangerous. Well,
people should take their own responsibility for what they want to be doing.
Of course they do.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that was a very key learning and very interesting to spend a day with him. But the other thing is that Denali has 600,000 visitors in a 15-week period, and all of them going on school buses, US yellow school buses, which are made for kids. And I can't sit in them straight. You have to go sideways. But your only options were one trip was 5 hours into the park and out, or 7 hours into the park and out. And you turn around at the same spot. And out at that spot, there was a very, very plain cafeteria, and you could sort of relax there for a bit. And then you came back out. But the absolutely biggest lesson I learned here was all the drivers who were very skilled bus drivers had been trained to deliver an experience. Bus driving was a secondary that they had to have and be safe. They had to be able to understand the park and all about it and all the animals and so on, and how to entertain and how to deliver that. So most of the people working in it the guides came out of all their what do you call theatre schools? What are they called?
Acting schools or acting thespians. They're all thespians.
Anyway, they were all people that were studying to go into acting or that sort of thing. So that was another key learning, It wasn't about what you were delivering, it was how you did it. So I got on this bus and went out on the 501, and the guy started, and he was telling jokes, and it was really funny, and it was fun. You weren't allowed to open the windows except that much. And he'd say, oh, there's a bear. There's a bear. There's a bear. See that black spot there? That's a bear. Now, I'm damn sure it wasn't, but there's a moose. There's a fox. There's a eagle, But he made fun of it, and you really believed everyone was having a lovely time. So that was another one, taking people on a school bus, uncomfortable, etc. It was about what they got during the journey, and when they turned around and went back out again. So that was another valuable learning. Then I stayed at Denali, and I mentioned Denali Lodge, booked out years ahead, can't get in. It's still there, still going, still very simple, but a great experience. And the only way you can get in there is on a school bus in and school bus out, unless you want to walk for about 3 days. and nobody does. So that was good. Also, going back to British Columbia, went to the Rockies and experienced a very, very remote fishing camp by chance. By chance, I met someone whose husband owned a float plane, and he and his partner had a wilderness lodge, which is 1.5 hours flying out of a place called can't remember, but it was a very terrifying flight on a seaplane, which I sat on 8 big gas bottles. I had no seat. There was no seat. There was the pilot. He was a lovely guy, and he was half the business. The other half was out there, and we landed out there, and there was an incredible place, and spent the night out there with these guys. And it was a very remote fishing lodge, but unique fishing because they were brook trout, and there's very little of that there. Hence, it was successful. They could charge anything you like, almost. Another learning.
Okay, so then we eventually got to Scandinavia.
Yeah, Scandinavia was a bit different. I had lived there for some years and knew quite a bit about their stuff, and in a way it was similar stuff but very less developed, and it was not a big part of their future or industry at the time, the tourist side of things. However, the simple experience of their life out in the mountains and the fjords and so on. I was quite young when I was there initially, and so experiencing that gave me another understanding around, being an authentic experience in an authentic place and not trying to emulate
Anything.
someone else.
Okay, so almost 35 years on since you embarked on that pretty amazing journey. How have those findings helped you develop what you have in the last 35 years? So, you've built Strawn Village, Peppermint Cradle Mountain.
Cradle Mountain was the first one, and I had already we owned it at the time, and that gave me a big insight into what to deliver, which we did, and it was hugely successful. It was just
still is
amazing. So it gave me a huge amount of solid knowledge on delivering something in a simple way.
And and I suppose most recently Pump House Point, a wilderness.
Then Strawn Village from there, and at the time when I started developing Strawn Village after it sold out of Cradle Mountain, I also got this interest in Pump House Point, inside the World Heritage Area, inside the National Park, in this old pump house building. And I started on that. And Pump House went right through and took 30 years from when I started, got it open, operated for 6 or 7 years, and then sold it. So, I was just applying those learnings from before, and it was 100% full, virtually 95% full from day one, year round. Now, here's a learning from this. The owners that bought it started to apply their culture on trying to deliver an experience as a total, utter frigging failure, because they do not understand. You've got to provide genuine connection. The staff have to be genuinely connected, and delivering a absolute experience which connects them to where they are. Simple, and it worked. Hence, we were able to operate in a very expensive area in a very profitable way. because we weren't trying to be a high-end food operation or whatever, which is incredibly difficult to run even if you're in a city.
Yeah.
So simple excellence is the kind of, put that in brackets, simple excellence. And that's it, thing.
And to finish off, what's on the agenda now?
I want to get a bigger, better boat.
Besides getting a bigger, bigger boat, your next project?
No, the project I'm working on now is so completely different, but it's not in a way. It's about experiences.
Absolutely.
And
I was about to
it's
say.
about delivering an experience.
A
of something.
unique experience.
Mm.
And a simplistic, unique experience.
Yeah. So if you want to be the world's best, it's all very well having the nicest boat or the nicest bloody chocolates. But unless you deliver them in a way that connects you with the whole essence of where they are, you're missing out.